He may be yesterday's man at number 10, but it seems Tony Blair is still worth making a song and dance about.
There is one word that Tony Blair sees in that speckled darkness as he closes his eyes at night. Some see mysterious shapes, others replay the day gone by. Mr. Blair is a man of religion, a convert to Roman Catholicism, but not even the word of God can muffle this word of Tony. This word? After ascending to the premiership in 1997, Blair made a series of foreign military interventions. He argued that only the West, with Britain and the United States at its core, could defend the world from a series of dangerous threats. First it was the bombing of Iraq. Then it was Kosovo, Sierra Leone, Afghanistan, and an invasion of Iraq. In 2007, despite his best attempts, Blair succumbed to both the public pressure against the Iraq War and tensions within the Labour Party. Tony Blair was no longer popular. He handed over power to Gordon Brown, his longtime Chancellor. Blair's last foreign military intervention led to the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people, with millions in the region and across the world feeling its reverberations to this very day. He denied misleading Parliament and did not apologise for pursuing the war, as the lack of weapons of mass destruction became clear. Blair's own political career now lay amongst the dead. Or was it? Because Tony never really went away.
مشاهدينا الكرام، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. ضيفنا في هذه الحلقة من برنامج لقاء اليوم هو السيد توني بلير، رئيس وزراء بريطانيا الأسبق ومبعوث الرباعية الدولية من أجل تحقيق السلام في الشرق الأوسط.
Hours after his resignation in June 2007, the Quartet, a group comprising of the United Nations, the United States, the European Union, and the Russian Federation, appointed Blair as special envoy. Blair was charged with aiding in the creation of a viable Palestinian state. This effort failed. The Palestinian public saw Blair as a war criminal and too close to Israel, whilst the Israelis saw him as little more than a slightly misguided ally. Years later, in between various speaking engagements, Blair accepted a senior advisory role at American bank JP Morgan, paying £2 million a year. Weeks later, another post at Swiss firm Zurich Insurance, and then a position at Korean natural resource company UI Energy. Then a lecturing post and grants for a worldwide educational initiative that died a quiet death in the latter half of the 2010s. In the years that followed, Blair would add to his portfolio a position at a venture capital firm, director of a charity. Blair toured the world, with the British taxpayer picking up a ballooning security bill. In 2008 alone, Blair earned at least £7 million. He now had a small fortune, and it seemed no one, except for Blair, knew where it had originated. Perhaps even he didn't. So much so that the Guardian newspaper ran a competition to unpick his Byzantine financial arrangements. The former Prime Minister had set up a web of charities and holding companies. Amongst these were the organisations the Tony Blair Faith Foundation and the Tony Blair Africa Governance Initiative. After leaving his Quartet job in 2015, he established the Initiative for the Middle East. In 2016, Blair would combine the Tony Blair Faith Foundation, the Tony Blair Africa Governance Initiative, and the Institute for the Middle East into a single organisation, the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. In 2008, Tony looked back home. He could pay off the mortgage on his Connaught Square London townhouse and its adjoining Mews house, building added to the family portfolio in 2007. It was time to settle down. The kids had gone to university. The Blairs were firmly set for a very comfortable retirement.
Oh no, I knew I shouldn't have done this programme. Quiet night in with Cherie.
Then one night, Tony Blair closed his eyes. He was tired. Iraq, Kosovo, Sierra Leone, Afghanistan and Iraq once more. The next intervention would be closer to home. In his memoirs, Blair implies that he possessed an elusive intelligence that his eventual successor Gordon Brown lacked. He called this a lacuna, a vacuum. One should amputate what he calls political feelings in favour of political calculation. Set aside ideology, do what you want, act as you think, down to the small details. Over the next 18 years, Blair would make a series of interventions in British politics. He could exercise his lacuna without regard for the responsibilities of the British state. Most of the post-war prime ministers had occasionally made public comments on government policy. For Blair, it would become a ceaseless routine. He would do so out of a sense of duty, to protect his legacy, and to further his evolving personal beliefs and financial interests. The former Prime Minister believed that only his paternal wisdom, his lacuna, his vacuum, could rescue Britain from the perilous path upon which it now trod without him. He began in earnest in early 2009, evading questions about extraordinary renditions, a CIA program in which war on terror suspects were abducted, transported to a third country, and tortured. He said he was not aware of Britain's involvement and refused to condemn the practice. Blair, along with the British security state, colluded with the Americans to abduct Muslims from around the world, and even British citizens. Blair dodged questions. He said to wait for the facts. In February 2009, Tony Blair met Barack Obama. Blair was given the title First Friend by the new president. He had gone to meet with Obama even before his successor, Prime Minister Gordon Brown. In October, Blair realised his bid for the President of the European Council had failed to gain traction. In December 2009, Blair urged world governments to agree to a new climate accord at COP15 Copenhagen.
And I wanted to put aside party differences and work together in the national interest.
The coalition immediately began a huge program of austerity. In 2010, the government planned to cut 500,000 public sector jobs and raise the retirement age to 66 to make savings of £83 billion. Conservative voting areas were spared the excesses of the Chancellor's measures. Labour safe seats experienced the worst of the austerity cuts in England. A handful of months later, Blair published his aforementioned memoir, A Journey, with which he combined with a series of public appearances in its promotion tour. In it, he made the case that globalization had made military intervention in rogue regimes even more necessary. He listed Robert Mugabe's Zimbabwe and Iran as the interventions that got away. In tandem with the praise of Cameron's approach to Northern Ireland, a retrospective Blair now criticised his own government's spending. Despite starting the Fundamental Savings Review, as Blair called it, in February 2006, it bore little fruit. Instead, Tony blamed Gordon for not cooperating with the exercise. The publishing of the memoir was itself a huge political intervention. Westminster journalists found it fascinating. A glimpse behind the curtain, as indeed did a portion of the public, with The Journey becoming the fastest-selling autobiography of all time. As the lobby journalists pored over each page, a new revelation was plastered upon the front pages and blogs in early September 2010. Blair had an alcohol problem. Blair knew Brown would be a disaster. Blair did not foresee the death and destruction in Iraq. Blair was good with Diana. And the Queen. Blair spends a lot of time on the toilet. Blair has sex with Cherie. The former Prime Minister's prose served to launder his reputation. He did not do any bad things, but if he did, it was not his fault. After all, who could have anticipated what happened?
I don't have to sign on today, mate.
No, but it'll sign you then it just confirms you came in.
Well, what am I signing for here then? I have to sign on my job seekers agreement day, which I sign on. That ain't nothing to do with today.
Right, I'll explain why we do this. If you don't turn in at all from you don't come back for your signing day.
I'm due tomorrow, so
yeah,
I'm
I know,
come
but
tomorrow.
if you don't come in tomorrow...
No, but I am coming tomorrow. I'm going to fulfil my job seekers agreement.
I'm just saying, if you get run over by a car tonight and you don't come in, if you sign that, at least we can pay you.
Massive leap.
A charity which runs food banks says it's seen a dramatic rise in people struggling to feed their families. In some cases, people are faced with the choice of starving or stealing food just so their children can eat.
The way in which this good idea, which is that students and workers ought to be struggling together and workers actually have a lot more clout in society than students, has turned into a complete fantasy version of reality about what is taking place at the moment and about how we can turn a student movement into something much bigger than just a student movement.
Make no mistake, friends, the people know where the responsibility for this crisis lies. Labour created it. The Tory Liberal coalition are in the process of making it worse. Now, I know that some folk in the Labour Party hope that now they're in opposition, we'd all engage in a form of collective amnesia, that we would all forget the appalling mess into which they led this country. Unfortunately for them, it hasn't worked out like that.
No, I mean, I think the one country that got it right was Iceland, which said to some of these banks, "You bust."
What, you just let them crumble?
Let them go. Let them go.
Why don't we do that?
Do you know why?
No.
Do you know why?
No, I don't.
Because our banking system is not controlled by the Bank of England.
No, it's controlled by the International Monetary
Or the
Fund.
FSA, or the British government. It's controlled now by the European Commission, and the European Commission and the European Central Bank and the IMF have virtually bloody merged.
Yeah, the IMF, yeah.
Look at the appointment this week.
The international
Look at the appointment. I mean, all
I can tell you about this guy. He's hilarious. I created the CSL market. I worked for Morgan Stanley. I can tell you what fucking value it is. This guy George, like every time he was hilarious. It's going to be a big pot. We're going to fight over it. The wonky eye had white so that you couldn't look him in the eye. He's a me, he's everywhere.
That's a massive leap. You're suggesting
right, forget it.
I'm going to be run over or something? Massive leap of assumption, really.
We've finished.
Okay.
Yeah. Any questions?
Are you happy in your job?
Yes.
Do you like lumping everybody into one group?
We don't do that. So that's yours. So Ingis will be getting in touch with you shortly, in the next week.
Little more than a year after its implementation, austerity would boil over. Blair would be there to lend a hand. The Metropolitan Police shot Mark Duggan. One witness describes how Duggan was summarily executed whilst pinned to the floor. A firearms officer present later underlined that he felt he was in threat of imminent danger. At the High Court, another witness recalled the police issued no warning before opening fire, whilst yet another recalled 2 warnings. There were various evidence and procedural irregularities. The police hid evidence and concealed themselves behind new Labour surveillance legislation passed in the year 2000. Duggan's family demanded answers. They marched to their local police station in protest the night of the killing. What happened next has never been verified, but by evening violence had started.
Violence has raised questions about how best to deal with rioting and disorder on our streets. And joined now from we've just spoken to Patrick Mercer. I'm now joined by Darcus Howe, who is a writer and broadcaster, and we can speak to him now. And Marcus Dow is in Croydon. Marcus Dow, are you shocked by what you've seen there last night?
No, not at all. I have been living in London for 50 years. There are so many different moods and moments. But what I was certain about, listening to my grandson and my son, is that something very, very serious was going to take place in this country. Our political leaders had no idea. The police had no idea. But if you looked at young blacks and young whites with a discerning eye, and a careful hearing, they have been telling us, and we would not listen, that what is happening in this country to them.
Mr. Howe, if I can just stop you, Mr.
You went to the stores that you'd applied for a job at?
Yeah. I went across, like, I even went to Clapham, yeah, to go where I handed out a CV. I was like, yeah, you didn't want to reply back to an email, or I come up here with my CV. I was like, yeah, this is payback, innit? Payback. I done this, basically, to provide for my family, innit? Like, I got some stuff for my son, yeah, and I got some stuff for me, like some clothes, trainers.
You're 16 years old, but you were getting stuff for your son?
Yeah. Yeah, I had to get some stuff for him.
So what did you get for him?
I got him clothes. I got him nappies, powder, the whole Johnson set.
You were all out together, weren't you?
Yeah. Like, I got some TVs as well, plasmas, PS3, like laptops and stuff, innit?
And how much money do you expect to make from all that?
At least a couple of grand, like at least two grand or something like that.
Generations of people have worked hard and come from all sorts of backgrounds with nothing and worked hard to get what you guys just went out and took. Do you not think that that's a better way of doing it, a more respectable way of doing it than just going and stealing?
We work hard, but they're not giving us no jobs. Like, give our CVs.
They're not giving us the opportunity to go work hard and show them, yeah, we can do this. We can be as, like, you know, wealthy as you. Like, we can do exactly what you can do.
We tried
but
to do this.
They don't want to give us that chance. They don't want to give us that chance.
Right now, it looks like they're in the future for young people. That's how I see it, innit? Because the government, they're not helping no one out except for the rich people. They don't care for us. They just leave us on the blocks to do whatever we do.
Thank you very much for joining us from Croydon. Darcus Howe, their writer and broadcaster.
Okay, well, there's been a huge knock-on to lots of aspects of
He doesn't know what to do because she sounds like an idiot.
It's my great pleasure and my privilege to ask you to welcome the Prime Minister, the Right Honourable David Cameron.
Thank you. Thank you.
The 15th of August 2011, 9 days after Mark Duggan was killed, David Cameron, the new Conservative Prime Minister, makes a speech in an Oxfordshire school. He explained that Britain was broken and needed mending. According to Cameron, Britain was in the process of a moral decline, with citizens that do not know the difference between right or wrong. He also blamed the Human Rights Act, a flagship Blair legislative achievement, for twisting and misrepresenting human rights in a way that has undermined personal responsibility. His government began using the street surveillance technologies introduced during New Labour to catch those who had participated in the riots. Ed Miliband, the new leader of the Labour Party, urged for restraint until the causes of the riots were properly understood, condemning the rioters as immoral, while simultaneously drawing parallels between their greed and that of the bankers, who had crashed the economy years before. He also gave reasonable credit to inequality and to the massive journey of austerity Britain had just embarked upon. Tony was taken aback. Just 4 years ago, this was his Britain. In many ways, it still was. To strike back, Blair wrote a piece in The Observer. He also took on the paternalistic Thatcherite language of the doctor. I think we are in danger of the wrong analysis leading to the wrong diagnosis, leading to the wrong prescription. On the whole, Blair blamed culture, with the implication being that he was talking about black culture. This would not be the first time he had done so, having blamed a spate of murders on black culture in 2007. He muttered the word inequality, prescribing rioters' behaviours instead to the paradigm shift in economic and political influence away from the West, whilst defending the bankers' greed, congratulating himself on his successful 2005 Olympic bid, and the growth of his sports foundation in Africa in the process. Most of them are shaping up that way by the time they are in primary school, or even nursery. You will find this in virtually every developed nation. Blair continues. The last government should take real pride in the reductions in inequality, the improvement in many inner city schools, and the big fall in overall crime. But none of these reaches this special group. Tony ends by outlining the plans that he had before he resigned from the premiership. He outlined a series of impossible and already realised and failed schemes. intervening literally family by family and at an early stage, even before any criminality had occurred. He also wanted to reform antisocial behaviour laws. After I'd left, the agenda lost momentum, but the papers and the work are all there. Blair ended with this passage. Elevate this into a highfalutin wail about a Britain that has lost its way morally, and we would depress ourselves unnecessarily, trash our own reputation abroad, and, worst of all, miss the chance to deal with the problem in the only way that will work. Blair's intervention was not so much as a criticism as a Cameronite echo. Naming this a moral problem would depress us. Cameron's speech was good politics but bad policy. Cameron was lacking his lacuna.
Which is there's a choice of leaders and there's a choice of teams to run this country.
Tony tried his best, but this group are beyond saving. No more could be done. And just when he was going to do drastic measures to prevent social exclusion, the Labour Party evicted him from Downing Street. Despite this potential early challenge, Tony Blair's legacy was saved. Blair wrote this article to preserve his own reputation and to safeguard his worth as an advisor to governments across the world. In reality, if anything or anyone was to blame for the London riots of 2011, it was Tony Blair. His tenure had seen inequality skyrocket. By 2007, wealth inequality was the worst it had been since 1929, years before the Great Depression. Austerity, defended by Blair, had only added more fuel to the fire.
I joined the Labour Party for reasons of belief in social justice. I decided if I really wanted to make a difference and get something done, then I had to join. You know, instead of talking about things, get in there and get your hands dirty and get doing things.
Newspapers identified Tony Blair's column as a rare intervention. Despite the fact that after he resigned, he had defended the government's role in the Extraordinary Rendition Programme, gone to meet with the new American president before his successor, urged the world to agree to the COP15 protocol, defended austerity, and released a memoir, all of which attempted to shackle together his splintered reputation and legacy. All of these interventions were undertaken despite Blair promising not to get involved in British politics. And yet his comment piece in The Observer was a rare intervention.
Здесь, на 6-м этаже нашего нового здания, работает дежурная бригада, которая выпускает номер. Все мы, от главного редактора и до курьера, каждый день заглядываем сюда. Хотя бывает и не дежурим по номеру. Но наша профессия такова, что главные события, на которые столь щедра планета, мы обязаны узнавать первыми, чтобы осмыслить их и быстро, толково и доходчиво донести до читателя. Кто-то подсчитал, а среди нас есть и специалисты по статистике, что правдист проводит в стенах редакции половину своей жизни. Это может показаться преувеличением, но наш рабочий день начинается в 10 утра, а завершается где-то около полуночи. И все дни у нас рабочие, ведь и в праздники газеты выходят. Но дело даже не в часах. А разве когда идешь домой или едешь в метро, не думаешь о газете, о завтрашнем номере, о материале, который должен написать? Конечно же, думаешь. И поэтому не полжизни, а вся она в газете и с газетой. Иначе и быть не может, потому что журналистика требует всего человека, до конца. Во всех городах страны читатель должен получить газету рано утром. И поэтому первый ее выпуск мы должны подписать в 6 часов вечера.
Москва, Красная площадь.
In 2005, Alexei Yurchak, a Russian-American anthropologist, published a book, Everything Was Forever Until It Was No More. In the book, he coined the term hypernormalization. He argued that in the USSR after the death of Stalin, public discourse, in the absence of what he calls an external master, or someone who can moderate the discourse, became cumbersome, citational, and circular. Newspapers began repeating other newspapers and local Communist Party branch speeches copied at length from other sources. The performative dimension of the speech became more important than the constitutive dimension. Authors became conveyors of pre-existing knowledge rather than a producer of new knowledge. They minimized their own personal voice. Yurchak also noticed the role of modifiers or adjectives in Soviet discourse. Certain nouns would always be paired with certain modifiers. In Siberian newspapers, for example, the following phrases appeared time after time. The high level, brotherly help, creative labor, active participation. This manner of phrasing planted an idea that these modifiers were presupposed or implied. These prefabricated phrases became the building blocks of Soviet discourse. Once knowledge had already been manufactured, it was not to be created again, only passed along.
Бурными, долго не смолкающими аплодисментами приветствуют москвичи и гости столицы руководителей Коммунистической партии и Советского государства. На центральную трибуну мавзолея поднимают...
Going backwards, yes it did. That was a commentary today.
We're in the Twilight Zone.
Should have brought Way at the Beat.
Yeah.
It's fun. Makes you wonder, is Tom really going forward?
In 2010, Yurchak saw that the same process of hypernormalization he had seen in the late USSR was happening in the West. And there were parallels. Just as the state media apparatus in the USSR conveyed centrally planned messaging, media in the West relies on news agencies. Journalism in the 21st century needs to react to trends and digital events, whilst media companies react to their competitors' page views. National newspapers therefore produce tens of almost identical articles. Cuts in the newsroom means plagiarism and recycling of the journalist's previous work. Journalists now move from company to company seamlessly. The voice of the newspaper no longer exists. The same TV news blares in the background of every broadsheet and tabloid newsroom. The performance of news is more important than the news itself. In Britain, newsrooms have been cut drastically since the turn of the century. To write articles, most media companies depend on the coverage of newswires, such as the Press Association, or excessively rely on press releases. Often there are no bylines. The internet has taken over society in ways that no one could have predicted. Most publications are ideologically aligned, as 3 companies control 90% of the newspaper market. Journalists cycle between mastheads on Fleet Street. The rare intervention has no relation to reality, and yet it would be used year after year in British newspapers to describe Blair's public comments. The association of this modifier and this noun in this hypernormalized union will endow upon Blair the power to make public statements and be taken seriously, providing the press is on side. The old Blairites and the Labour right will exploit this to win factional battles within the Labour Party. Blair will be afforded rare interventions on some topics, but not others. And he will be given rare interventions by some newspapers more than the next. In the pursuit of profit, some newspapers will give rare interventions when they would normally criticise. And in contrary to the popular opinion, that Britain has a pluralistic, diverse and free press, albeit one with a highly concentrated ownership structure, Blair's interventions and their coverage in the newspapers revealed that the press is even more highly centralised and ideologically aligned than even its worst critics would believe.
To show you what an illusion truth is. And I want to thank you for sitting in the chair as this part of my job. I'd like for everyone to take a look at that cake. I want you to remember something about a photograph, the headline, right in my hair. I'm sorry, Mayor, I don't have time to read the whole article. See me, I can show you the whole thing. If you were to look the word illusion up in the dictionary, one of the definitions you will find is this: that an illusion is a deception of the perception. Look at the phrase, deception of the perception. You see, I improve your perception of society.
In response to Blair's comments, national and international newspapers and websites ran very similar articles. Only 4 of these articles have a journalist's name in the byline, with 2 of the articles written by the same person. The foreign news articles listed relied on a news agency, in this case the French state-funded AFP. In each article, the modifier of the intervention was rare or rarely. This modifier implies that Blair's comments were extremely noteworthy. However, this first rare intervention was not rare. But for many of the journalists who had spent the best part of 10 years covering the former Prime Minister and had meticulously surveyed each page of his memoir in his absence, this was Britain's greatest and most successful political mind of the new millennium thus far, propelling himself back into the public eye through the back pages of a broadsheet. Even those that disagreed with Blair on an ideological level held and hold a begrudging sense of respect towards him. He was an operator. For them, this statement was rare. They did not see enough of him. Here was the elder statesman, graciously looking back at an Albion in need.
Stand by, record. There we go. Well, Mr. Cameron, it's nearly the summer holidays. Where are you off to this year?
I thought I might nip down to Tuscany. I believe Tony has rather nice facilities down there, and we've got so much in common these days.
Well, Tony, are you quite happy to have Mr. Cameron come and stay? But he might drink all your wine.
Oh, it's all right. I got that for nothing as well, so that's quite okay.
You don't mind, mind you? But Dave's actually a beer drinker. Did you know?
Beer?
Beer and pasties. Beer and pasties.
Beer and pasties. Yes, yes. I'm quite sure. I mean, we'll get sherry to get it from somewhere along. You know.
Don't mind a drop of sherry either.
And so you went to see Her Majesty?
Well, actually, she came to us. She came to Downing Street.
That was very generous of her.
Yes, well, Jubilee and all that, and nice photo opportunity for the boys.
Which boys?
Well, it was all the...
Mr. Major was there, I believe, as well.
Oh yes, all the compos mentis PMs that have served the Queen.
Who's the man who is the king? He does. He does seem to be having a sticky time.
Well, he's rather miscalculated. Rather miscalculated.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just over a year later, Blair resurfaced in the newspapers. He warned of the increasing Euroscepticism in the Conservative Party and the consequences of an EU membership referendum in Britain. He described Euroscepticism as a virus. He gave interviews to newspapers and wrote opinion pieces. On the 28th of November 2012, Blair gave a speech to a pro-European business group, Business for New Europe, at Chatham House. He had even set up a Twitter account to manage his commentary on Europe that has laid dormant since the day after he created it. The Independent and the Telegraph speculated that Blair wanted another attempt at securing the presidency of the European Council. Unusually for the Chatham House venue, Blair wanted the events of his speech broadcast to the world. But before the former Prime Minister had even made the speech on the 28th, the newspapers had already made up their minds. Or rather, someone had, as all of the preview articles looked eerily similar.
A large number of interpreters make sure that each member of Parliament understands everybody else.
Inside, the session is in full swing. But what work needs to be done before all members meet in the hemicycle?
New laws are always drafted by the European Commission.
The Daily Express, the London Evening Standard, and ITV's news website published almost identical articles. This is because they had all chosen to publish the Press Association Newswire coverage of the event. ITV shortened their copy of the Newswire for their live updates feed, removing almost all of the underlying context for Blair's speech. The Observer, The Times, The Guardian, and The Telegraph had been handed the same press briefing, or perhaps found time to modify the PA briefing. The Telegraph emphasised Blair's Europhilia, whereas The Times took a more balanced approach. The Observer presented Blair as embarking upon a great crusade to save the European project. The Telegraph and The Times did not present Blair's argument that remaining in the EU, at least in part, would counter the increased power of China. The obfuscation of the venue is also notable. For The Times, this was simply a speech in London. For The Telegraph, in its future tense article, this was a speech to the lobby group Business in New Europe, and later a speech to business leaders. The Guardian described the venue as a speech to the Business for New Europe coalition of business leaders, whereas in the PA-derived articles, the venue was a speech to a business audience. The Independent named the audience as Business for New Europe, whilst the BBC labelled the spectators as a pro-EU Business for New Europe group. All of these characterizations are broadly incorrect, but for different reasons. Business for New Europe was a lobbying group of large FTSE 100 companies and multinational corporations. Its advisory board was dominated by the big banks. They had a vested interest in preventing a Brexit, as it would impede their capital flows and complicate their businesses. The Telegraph, keen to downplay the potential side effects or lack of support amongst business, chose to qualify the group with the word lobby, and later omit their name entirely. The Guardian, a pro-Remain outlet, wanted to express that a potential Brexit would be disliked by the powerful forces of capital. The duplicate PA articles in the Express, the London Evening Standard, and ITV's news website were more interesting. The PA article, whilst nominally impartial, falls slightly more in favour of Tony Blair. The Express, a very Eurosceptic newspaper, published the PA newswire with very little editing. It does not read with the standard Eurosceptic attitudes the paper became known for. Only the profit motive can provoke a newspaper so fervent in their beliefs as the campaign for leaving the EU even as early as 2010 to abandon them in this manner. The London Evening Standard also chose to use the PA to save money. It had barely scraped a profit in the 2012 financial year, after making a loss of $7.5 million in 2011. In the years since the 2008 financial crisis, it had dismissed tens of journalists in its newsroom. After the speech took place, the press did not label this intervention a rare intervention. With the exception of ITV's newsfeed, the PA-derived articles labelled this an intervention, as did The Guardian. Tony Helms at The Observer called this speech an intervention in his future tense article, but it was impassioned, not rare this time. For the New York Times, this was the intervention of such a high-profile figure. For the BBC, this was a simple quibble. The Times and the Telegraph refused to call this an intervention at all. But all newspapers used the verb warn to describe the speech. Why not a rare intervention? It was not a rare intervention for much the same reason that the group behind the speech was not made entirely clear. It had been almost a year since the last rare intervention. The liberal metropolitan journalists writing in the BBC, The Observer, or The Guardian did not believe that Brexit could or would ever happen. They were content to label this simply an intervention as there were no stakes. This was pages filled in a newspaper or clicks for the online edition, interesting to some, but not an important broadcast to be digested by the entire population. The more conservative Eurosceptic newspapers believed Brexit could happen, not through a prolonged probing of the population, but through their interactions with Conservative Party politicians and networks. They did not label this a rare intervention, or even an intervention at all, as they were ideologically opposed to Blair. They did not have to give credit to Blair's ideas, nor emphasize these ideas' importance. They saw that the political will existed, and they saw Brexit's base amongst the political class grow. Still, even the more conservative newspapers used the verb warn in collaboration with their liberal colleagues. They still had some sort of respect for their former Prime Minister.
كوباني كما وعدنا قنوات الإعلام الدخول إلى هذه المنطقة لرصد المظاهرات التي تطالب بالحرية. نلاحظ تكبير! تكبير! بالروح بالدم نديك يا شهيد بالروح بالدم نديك يا شهيد بالروح بالدم.
The question is the business of the House motion as on the order paper. As many as other opinions say aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order. We now come to the motion in the name of the Prime Minister relating to Syria and the use of chemical weapons. The text of the motion submitted...
As calls to intervene militarily intensified, from both NATO allies and the media, British military intervention in Syria against President Assad seemed inevitable. Foreign military excursions had become extremely unpopular with the British public. 10 years on from 2003, the population had not forgotten the maelstrom of deceit and catastrophe that was the Iraq War. According to one poll in 2013, more than a fifth of respondents even believed that Tony Blair should be tried as a war criminal. Another poll in 2013 saw the public oppose a missile attack on Assad-controlled Syria 2-1. Despite this, Tony Blair led the campaign to intercede in the Middle East once more. He appeared in the British press almost every single month of 2013 and 2014, agitating for intervention, even after Parliament's August 2013 vote not to join the Americans in their military operations. In between agitating for British involvement in the conflict, the former Prime Minister found time for some other activities. He defended Margaret Thatcher's legacy, which was inextricably linked to his own. He went to Israel to celebrate the birthday of President Shimon Peres. He claimed in the Times that the civil service was no longer fit for purpose. He maintained that he would have won the lost 2010 election.
Well, we in Britain have our Queen, and you have your Shimon.
He petitioned the British state to help the new Egyptian government. He requested government funds for one of his charities, a request which was denied. He criticised Miliband for not supporting military action in Syria. He gave more speeches in an attempt to convince an increasingly Eurosceptic Britain to remain in the European Union. He defended his own actions in Iraq. The weak government that the coalition forces had left in Iraq had its own violent responses to protesters during the Arab Spring. The Islamic State, a force that had formed in reaction to the 2003 invasion, now rose to threaten the entire region. It is reasonable to say, therefore, that Blair was in the newspapers, the websites, and the blogs a lot over these 2 years. He was a regular fixture on radio and television. His business interests and charitable foundations expanded ever further. Blair had effectively become a celebrity talking head, in his pursuit to continue to sculpt Britain even after his loss of political office. You would not think it, but 4 rare interventions occurred in 2013 and 2014. That is to say, journalists described a select handful of Blair's public comments as rare interventions. The Times, April 2013. Billy Kember writes of a difficult week in early 2013 for Labour leader Ed Miliband. On top of breaking his wrist, a cacophony of criticism from former New Labour figures warned Miliband that Labour was becoming no more than a party of protest. Amongst the New Labour alumni, the patron himself, Tony Blair, wrote an article in the New Statesman condemning Miliband. Blair made the case for more centrist politics. He outlined his pet topics: education, means-tested benefits, Technology for Population Management, Biometrics. The Mirror, February 2014. The Mirror's James Lyons reports of Tony Blair's satisfaction as Miliband changes the Labour Party internal election procedures. As part of the Collins Review, Labour will now require trade union members to opt in to the party in an effort to dilute the power of trade unions within Labour. This came following the Falkirk parliamentary candidate affair. In place of the Electoral College system, a system that shared voting power between MPs, Labour members and affiliated organisations, Labour would implement a one-member, one-vote system. Every Labour member's vote would be worth the same, whether they be a member, an MP or a trade unionist. Leadership hopefuls needed 15% of the Parliamentary Labour Party to nominate them. The Daily Mail, September 2014. Alan Roden, writing in the Scottish Daily Mail, reports of Tony Blair's desire for Scotland to remain part of the United Kingdom. This article comes 3 days before the independence referendum of 2014. Blair, according to Roden, is reluctant to participate in the Remain campaign, as he is aware of his unpopularity in Scotland. The Guardian, November 2014. The Guardian, in its Live Politics blog, reports on a speech made by Ed Miliband in November 2014. Andrew Sparrow, the blog's editor, links Miliband's criticism of UKIP to an interview given by Tony Blair in May 2014. In the interview, Blair recommends that Miliband does not follow UKIP in its anti-immigrant and Eurosceptic attitudes.
What a good, positive message that sent to the outside world. And later on...
So why are all these rare interventions, and not the constant request to intervene in Syria? The repeated speeches? The pleas to the population to remain in the EU? The defence of an invasion that left hundreds of thousands dead and even more in the danger of ISIS? What is the link? All these newspapers had some form of a political interest in underscoring the importance of Blair's words. In the Soviet Union, the author or the speechwriter had an interest in delivering hypernormalized phrases to their audiences, as they had to simultaneously preserve their position in a one-party state, whilst also navigating the lack of new authoritative sources of discourse. In Britain in 2013 and 2014, journalists had motive to act likewise, to preserve the broad status quo and to see out their own political views in a void of new authoritative discourse. The Times, a moderately conservative outlet, held the view that Miliband's fiscal policies were too extreme. Miliband wanted to raise the rate of tax on salaries above 150,000 from 45p to 50p, returning it to the same rate set during the latter New Labour years under Brown. Miliband also wanted to create a mansion tax on mansions over £2 million, which was approximately 60,000 to 100,000 households at the time. In 2015, The Times endorsed a continuation of the Conservative Lib Dem coalition for re-election. Kemba, the author of the article, would later join the BBC as political investigations correspondent. James Lyons, the author of The Mirror's Rare Intervention, is a Blairite. Lyons had an interest in extolling the wisdom of Blair, in combating what many Blairites saw as an excessive influence of trade unions on Labour Party policy. Lyons would later become a deputy political editor for The Times, during which he ran countless articles aiming to undermine later Labour leadership. After 6 years working communications at the NHS, and a year's stint as a lobbyist for TikTok, Lyons joined the communication department in Number 10 under Keir Starmer. Similarly, Roden, in the unionist newspaper Scottish Daily Mail, aims to imprint upon his readers their obligation to vote no in the referendum. Blair would not make comments about this usually, but this is that serious. Just 2 years later, Roden was employed as Labour's communication director in Scotland. Afterwards, Roden founded a public relations and lobbying agency. Andrew Sparrow, the author of Blair's last rare intervention in 2014, was formerly a writer for both the Daily Mail and the Daily Telegraph. Sparrow is a creature of the lobby and has written for The Guardian's live politics blog since 2010. In 2014, UKIP were rising as a political force. They won 128 new seats on councils, received the most amount of European Parliament votes, and had even won 2 seats in the House of Commons by November. The immediate frontrunner was a Blairite, Andy Burnham, who now positioned himself on the soft left of the party. He was also endorsed by the majority of Labour MPs. Nearly a month after Burnham announced that he was participating in the contest, Jeremy Corbyn, a little-known left-wing backbencher MP, announced he was running. He ran a campaign promising anti-austerity politics. Corbyn was nominated by MPs across the party, as they sought to create the illusion of a broad church, or a field of candidates, in a Labour Party almost completely dominated by the old Blairites and centrists. But by July, it became more and more clear that Jeremy Corbyn would become the next leader of the Labour Party. Each week, the margin of victory grew. A YouGov poll of Labour members, commissioned by The Times, was released. It found that Jeremy Corbyn was firmly ahead as the preference of 43% of voters. Andy Burnham, the closest challenger, lagged behind at 26%. Even the pollsters were taken aback at Corbyn's rise.
Thank you very much. It's very kind of you.
Hours later, Tony Blair gave a speech at Blairite think tank Progress in London, followed by an interview with comedian Matt Ford. Blair scolded the would-be Corbyn voters. He ridiculed the candidate. It would later emerge that he had even plotted to remove Corbyn from the party in 2004. He believed that a Corbyn leadership would destroy the soul of the Labour Party, his Labour Party, its labyrinthine bureaucratic barricades, its donor directory, the Thatcherite economics with a kind face. All of it lay at risk. In the hours that would follow, some local titles in every major newspaper in Britain would write an article that simultaneously gave both an account of Blair's interview and a description of the results of the poll. Many of these would feature a rare intervention. Once again, many of the articles were indistinguishable or had so much in common as to make it clear that they were based on one original text. The British edition of American liberal website Huffington Post, the Yorkshire Post, the Daily Record, which is the sister paper of the Mirror in Scotland, the Scotsman, the Daily Mail, and the Telegraph all contain shared text. The Telegraph published 2 articles about the events of the 22nd of July. One of those articles, and an article in the Daily Record, are near unedited extracts of the PA Newswire service. They are nearly identical, but diverge with differing Blair quotes. The Telegraph, unlike the Record, gives Jeremy Corbyn some coverage in its article, with a single line given, which is a reaction to Blair's remarks at the Progress event. The same line. In a rare intervention, the former Prime Minister Tony Blair said that for the party to shift left in the wake of their general election defeat would be to treat the electorate as if they were stupid. Appeared in the HuffPost UK, the Express and Star, a West Midlands local paper, and the Yorkshire Post. Despite using the same intervention phrase, the Express and Star published an almost entirely original article, in which the writer detailed the decisions and endorsements of local MPs going into the leadership contest. It is logical, therefore, to assume that the author of the article checked the newswire before writing, even just to retrieve one sentence. The 22nd of July articles by HuffPost UK and the Yorkshire Post were almost interchangeable. There is, however, a slight twist in the logic one would assume. The Yorkshire Post and the Scotsman are owned by the same parent company, National World, which is now owned by Media Concierge, a company that has tens of local newspapers in Ireland and Britain. It would be logical to assume that these newspapers would produce similar articles, if not entirely identical, as a parent company would seek to maximise profits and minimise labour costs. This is how the local media usually functions in Britain. In reality, the articles produced by the Yorkshire Post and the Scotsman were quite distinct. Whereas the Post centred its, or the PA's, coverage upon Tony Blair and the views of the Labour Party establishment, the Scotsman led with the comments of Lord Prescott on Tony Blair's interview. It has a completely different tone to that of the Post. But what the Scotsman does look similar to is the Daily Mail. They share the same rare intervention phrase. In a rare intervention in Labour politics, Mr. Blair suggested that anyone whose heart told them that they should back Corbyn should, quote, get a transplant. In fact, almost half of the Scotsman's article is the same as the final paragraphs of the Daily Mail's coverage. The same intervention phrase also featured in the National. It is possible that the National, the Daily Mail, and the Scotsman based their articles upon another PA Newswire briefing, or indeed upon another Newswire service such as Reuters. Sky News did not copy from Newswires. It stated that Mr. Blair's rare intervention comes after a YouGov poll suggested some 43% of Labour supporters would back the anti-austerity candidate as the party's new leader. The Guardian followed suit with a rare intervention of its own. Only this time it was not Blair interceding, but New Labour's prodigal son, David Miliband. Tony Blair is not mentioned, except in reference to Prescott's radio outburst. In a rare intervention in recent UK politics, David Miliband, who was narrowly beaten by his brother Ed in the 2010 leadership contest, predicted that ordinary Labour members would reject Corbyn's approach. The Guardian appealed to what it saw as the sensible, ordinary Labour members with the sensible Miliband brother, the one who missed out on the leadership by a whisker, the Blairite who got things done. David Miliband had all the good qualities of Tony Blair, but without the baggage. Future ambassador to the United States under Starmer and friend of notorious American paedophile Jeffrey Epstein, Lord Mandelson, was quoted later in the article also to the same, if somewhat tempered, effect, given the storm of scandals that he had been a party to as a member of the new Labour cabinets. The Guardian did describe Blair's comments as an intervention in its live blog element. It is refreshingly forthright. It recognises that this interview was undertaken with the primary purpose of influencing the Labour Party election. In May 2015, the Guardian editorial team did not endorse a particular candidate. Instead, the editors pleaded with the Labour Party to take time and examine all options. They believed that the next election would be a stepping stone to eventual power in 2 parliaments. By August, the Guardian reassessed the situation. It endorsed Yvette Cooper, who would eventually come third in the contest. The editors believed that Cooper would hold together the Blairites, the centrists, the soft left and the socialist campaign group, whilst being more electable than Corbyn. The Daily Mirror took a similar approach. Whilst it did not use the words rare intervention, it appealed to Labour membership with another figure from recent history, Lord Owen, one of the Gang of Four who resigned from Labour in 1981 to form the SDP. A large part of their grounds for resignation from Labour was in protest over the failure of Labour to institute a one-member, one-vote system in leadership elections. Labour heavyweights warned the party risks a repeat of the 1981 split as it tears itself apart amid the infighting and mudslinging since Jeremy Corbyn entered the race. Lord Owen now found himself arguing that the Labour membership, who had been handed the power of the one-member, one-vote system for the first time, could not be trusted with this power. In other words, he argued against himself. The Mirror quoted Lord Owen as saying, "They have to remember that all 4 of these candidates are decent people. But Jeremy Corbyn has not got enough support in the PLP to be an effective leader." The Mirror also dedicated space in the article for a lengthy, detailed description of the leadership election mechanisms and the ways in which readers can vote. In the next leadership election, no such section would appear in the Mirror's online articles. In August, the Mirror would eventually endorse Andy Burnham in the leadership contest. The Mirror's sister paper in Scotland, the Daily Record, would endorse Jeremy Corbyn, even though it had published the same rare intervention as the conservative Daily Telegraph. In other articles, Tony Blair's comments were described as an impassioned intervention in the Times, his most significant intervention since the general election in the Telegraph, and a warning in the BBC.
A footnote in this, very important. The SNP and UKIP.
The 22nd of July of 2015 was also the first time that some of the media class became conscious of the pure absurdity of the hypernormalised rare intervention and Blair's methods of influencing the country. In The Spectator, perennial Conservative candidate Sebastian Payne wrote, "Tony Blair has made his predictable intervention in the Labour leadership contest." Similarly, Sean O'Grady, writing in The Independent, chooses to place rare in inverted commas. But for both men, this recognition of the irrationality of the intervention is not an indictment of the media class, but simply a humorous vehicle through which to influence the Labour membership to not cast a vote for Corbyn and to trivialise the conditions that led to a shift to the left.
Jeremy Corbyn elected as leader of the Labour Party.
This humble rebel had to be persuaded even to stand, yet 250,000 people named him their first choice. Months ago that seemed impossible. By this morning the only surprise was the scale of his support. A new suit, maybe, but ideas he's held for decades.
We don't have to be unequal. It doesn't have to be unfair. Poverty isn't inevitable. Things can, and they will, change. Thank you very much.
But many of these MPs' politics are so far from his, they will not grin and bear it. 7 of the shadow cabinet have already resigned.
He's done it not by a small margin, but by a mile, a thumping victory. The unexpected candidate is now Labour's accidental leader.
This is an enormous achievement.
Can you believe that you've won by such a margin? Can you give a brief words to the audience sorry, who voted for you?
But his face betrays how brutal the coming months may be. But tonight, euphoria. These are his people. Nearly 100,000 of them signed up.
The decision to go to war in Iraq and to remove Saddam Hussein from power in a coalition of over 40 countries led by the United States of America was the hardest, most momentous, most agonizing decision I took in my 10 years as British Prime Minister. For that decision today, I accept full responsibility, without exception and without excuse. I recognise the division felt by many in our country over the war, and in particular, I feel deeply and sincerely, in a way that no words can properly convey, the grief and suffering of those who lost ones they loved in Iraq, whether members of our armed forces, the armed forces of other nations, or Iraqis.
I quote Shelley because he inspired like so many others do. I'm proud to be at Glastonbury because it inspires so many to music festivals all over the country. Let us be together and recognise another world is possible if we come together to understand that, understand the power we've got and achieve that decent, better society where everyone matters. Thank you for inviting me here today. I'm proud to be here. Thank you very much, Glastonbury.
What is, no, come on, answer me. We're speaking English. What does the English Oxford Dictionary define racism as?
Even though it had brought him to power, Corbyn did not truly understand the rage in society. He had believed in most of the ideas of his platform for his entire adult life. For him and those around him, it was logical that voters had finally arrived there too. Corbyn lacked any real power in the Parliamentary Labour Party. His colleagues were happy to see him lose at every opportunity. Corbyn's team, in their isolation, lacked clear communications and failed to fight back effectively against the machinations of the Labour Party bureaucracy, even though they had built parallel grassroots organisations such as Momentum to force change. A bizarre, diverse set of characters would have their own rare interventions in the Corbyn years as the Labour Party establishment sought to defeat a challenge from the left. In January 2016, the Mirror gave David Miliband a rare intervention. He demanded a return to the old Labour, the Labour of centre-left ambiguities and Blairite administration. In 2016, The Guardian wrote that Hilary Benn had made a rare intervention, despite the fact that he had been Shadow Foreign Secretary just 3 months before. He pleaded with the Labour right not to respond to abuse on social media amongst Corbynite backlash against the Labour right's readiness to support airstrikes in Iraq against ISIS. In January 2018, Tony Blair intervened, once again in a rare fashion, in an article in Sky News. He remained sceptical of Corbyn and urged him to rethink his Brexit strategy. Sky News acknowledges that the interview was part of a publicity stunt to promote Blair's piece on the website of his now renovated think tank, the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change. 2 years on, David Miliband was once again described as giving a rare intervention in British politics, in yet another Newswire article, pleading with Corbyn to support remaining in the single market. In November 2019, less than a month away from the election, the chief rabbi, Ephraim Mervis, writing in The Times, denounced Corbyn's Labour as a party overcome with anti-Semitism. The Guardian, the Jewish Chronicle, LBC described it as a rare intervention, despite Mervis having made the same statements at a steady pace over the previous 3 years. Even Stephen Hawking made a rare intervention according to the Hindustan Times. Luckily for this set, Jeremy Corbyn was uniquely weak. He and his advisors wanted to target the city metropolitan Liberal. But by the 2016 Brexit vote, it was clear that those in provincial England were resentful. The post-2008 financial settlement, austerity, and the Blair-Thatcher legacy had left swathes of the country in economic freefall. They wanted change, and fast. Corbyn failed to capitalise upon this. In 2019, Labour lost again, losing all of its gains in 2017. Corbyn resigned. In 2020, Labour returned to the right. Keir Starmer was elected leader of the Labour Party. He had promised continuity with Corbyn to win over the membership. Over the next 4 years, Starmer would abandon every principle of Corbyn's Labour. The Blairites, the Labour right, and the centrists were back behind the steering wheel. In 2024, the Conservative Party collapsed. Keir Starmer's Labour made huge gains, winning a very comfortable majority in the Commons. The rare intervention was all but retired, save for one article in The Independent in 2024. The hypernormalised rare intervention had been created in 2011 to ascribe importance to Blair's comments on the riots. Even in 2011, it had no relation to reality. Blair had made many public comments after his resignation in 2007. As the years went by, this process would continue, aided by the incessant use of the phrase in news agency newswires and the proliferation of these newswire articles in national and local newspapers. Britain had effectively developed a non-enforced, centrally planned media. Only it was not the government in control, but shareholders of these agencies. For journalists, the extensive use of news agencies cannot be a surprising revelation. But for those of us without knowledge of these agencies, those of us who read the papers, the news websites, or the blogs, one cannot help but leave with the impression that these journalists, who all supposedly have sensible opinions, have all arrived at the sensible conclusions independently. The rare intervention is to be taken seriously. This is a rare comment, therefore we should listen. For both news agency journalists and newspaper writers, the unique quality of the comment ensures that the article and the newspaper are sold, and buzz is generated around the reporting. A liberal democracy rests on the supply of good information. But in Britain, an opinion is written by an incredibly small set of news agency writers, and then regurgitated by an ever smaller set of newspapers. The trends of the digital era are moving against both the newspaper and the news agency. Whilst they had a monopoly on information for most of the post-industrial age, they are now both slowly dying. As budgets become tighter, newspapers will employ news agencies more. If this trend continues, newspapers will become merely a brand name. Buying and reading a newspaper will become a choice between a Pepsi or a Coke, a loaf of Warburtons or a loaf of Hovis, a Guardian or a Times.